Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hey, Tom.
Hey,
Hey, we are live now.
great.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. I see we have a couple of folks here on the call. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I want to thank Tom Tomerlin for joining us. So today, what I want to do is I'm going to tee up what we're trying to get accomplished today, and then we're going to dig right into it. Essentially, since the last time this subcommittee has met, our colleagues Andy Baxter and Tom Tomerlin have done sensitivity studies and also looked at the distributions of where HBCs would fall on the various ways that we were looking at weighting the different domains. And so we want to present that information to you. I think you'll find that it's really fascinating. Tom's been able to use some new technology that we're probably going to leverage in the future as well. But the goal here is for this team to be feeling really okay about where we're headed, make a final decision on the weighting, and then think about a couple of outlier decisions that need to be made with the goal of trying to put forth something to the full commission at the next commission meeting, which, Kim, can you chime in for a second and share when that full commission meeting is?
The next commission meeting is July 16th, so next Thursday at 9 a.m.
There you go. So without further ado, let's, Kim, if you could be prepared to pull up on the screen some of the stuff that Tom's going to go through. I'm teeing up Tom to do this, folks, because he has a much broader background on the technical side of some of these analyses, and I figured if he's available to do this presentation, why get a C from me when you can get an A from him? So with that, Tom, do you want to start with your stuff, or do you want to go through the couple points that Andy Baxter did? Do you want to do the sensitivity first, or do you want to do yours?
Let's go with Andy's points first, and then we'll do the graphical displays, if that's okay.
Sure.
Andy, are you okay with me running over? I'm sorry, all of a sudden I got the hiccups. Are you okay with me running through those points that you put up there, or do you want to do it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, I'm fine with you doing it.
Okay.
So Kim, can you share the name of the document that you're pulling up in case folks want to pull it up from their own stack of stuff? And Kim, you're muted.
I know. It is the EPP weighted accountability model sensitivity check. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it will help if you start the slideshow, Kim.
Oh, you combine them. That's right. Okay.
I was trying to start it. It's tricky and hold on. Here we go. Can you see that?
We can. Can you go to slide 2?
No, let's do Andy's first. So, all right. So these were the sensitivity analyses we ran using statistical software. I spared you all the regression coefficients, but Andrew and I and Andy and Kim met and went over these, and I just wanted to give you a quick rundown on what we saw here. And so the questions are, does the percentage of non-white predict the weighted composite score without domain 4? So this is without the diversity model. And yes, EPPs with greater than 40% non-white score significantly higher than those under 40%. So the non-white is not actually detracting from the overall composite score without the diversity measure, it's actually contributing to the quality of the program. The performance level without domain 4, yes, EPPs with greater than 40% non-white are significantly more likely to be at a level 4 rather than levels 1 through 3, and are more likely to be level 4 than EPPs with 20% or less non-white. Do some models, combination of weight, favor or disfavor EPPs based on the non-white percentage of non-white? Understandably, slight advantage to EPPs with higher percent non-white on models that weight domain 4 more. And that's just kind of circular. You know, if you have more non-whites, of course, you're going to score higher on domain 4. So it stands to reason that your composite, including domain 4, would be slightly higher if you have greater percentages of non-white. Does the percent of non-white predict performance on NESIS? A little bit higher for non-whites, but not statistically significant. EVOS, again, a little higher for non-white, but not significant. All these show that actually non-white are performing a little bit better, but those differences are not significant in any way. Except I do want to point out the recent graduate study, higher percentage of non-white score significantly lower. So what that is telling us is that non-white program completers are indicating that their preparation was not as good, or is not, I don't want to say good, are reporting lower survey results. Satisfaction, there you go. Thank you. Satisfaction with their preparation than white candidates. So that's an interesting finding, I think. And the employer survey, higher non-white percentage score, higher, but not statistically significant. So the short of this is that, you know, we ran all these sensitivity analyses. We saw a little bit of difference, not anything extraordinary, and in very few cases did we see any significance in the statistics for any of these measures. And I'm happy, and Andy is here to answer any questions that you might have on those sensitivity tests. Good. So I'm sorry, I was never good at the appropriate wait time. Did I provide appropriate wait time?
I did sense a pregnant pause there, Tom.
Okay, all right. All right, so.
I'd just like to say that I think this is helpful, so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was, I can't speak for Andy, but I enjoyed doing it. It was really illuminating. And
yeah, Andy and I were talking about that yesterday. We all like doing these kind of studies, so it was a fascinating exercise.
You really need to get out more.
I just respond by saying I'll think of more things I want y'all to do. So whatever works for y'all.
I have to say, Van, I expected that response from Andrew Lakis, but you blindsided me. I didn't expect it coming from you. All right. Kim, if we could go back up to the first sheet. Yes. So I apologize for not a great amount of captioning on this, but let me explain to you what you're looking at. If you look on the far left in the center, you're going to see the model that we're talking about here. This is the 45-10, 35-20, or 10, sorry, model. And what I've done, and this was a question of interest for everybody, the y-axis is your performance composite for the EPP. The x-axis is the total enrollment of the EPP. So one of your main questions was, does enrollment size have an impact on the performance composite? And so we wanted to look at that for all the models so that you're aware of how the distributions look. You'll also notice that the coloring, yellow, one of the primary questions was, how are HBCUs faring in this? Is there any indication that there's a disadvantage in our model to HBCUs? And so the HBCUs in all these models will be that dark green, and non-HBCUs will be yellow. I do want to note that there were two EPPs that are not included in this because of insufficient data, but everybody else is in the model. And so you can see the distribution there. The HBCUs, of course, are of what I would consider average size, falling between 0 and 50 program total enrollment. And the trend line there is giving you the relationship between program size and performance on the composite. And as you can see, of course, you've got an abundance of data down in the 0 to 50 range, and there's much less data as you extend out into the 100 and above. But you can see that those programs are kind of evenly distributed above and below the line as you move out. And that trend line, for those of you who care about these kinds of things, the slope there shows a slight, very, very small positive relationship between program size and performance. However, the p-value there of 0.78 tells you that that is not even remotely near anything statistically significant. So virtually no relationship in the model, 45, 10, 35, 10. Now, what I would like you to do, though, is keep an eye on, as we move through these models, keep an eye on that 0 to 50 and see how that distribution kind of moves around. And that's really the focus of interest here. And I want you to watch how that distribution kind of plays out as we move through these models. So Kim, if you could go to number 2. So this is your, nope, that's 3. So this is 55, 15, 15, 15. And I do want to point out, look at so Kim, go back for like 2 seconds to 1. Okay, and then now let's go to 2. So you can see how particularly that HBCU that's fairly high performing, this model moves them up in the scale pretty substantially from the previous scale. Just a reminder, the 45, the first domain are those domains around NESIS, EVOS, and other outcome measures of interest. So the higher weighting on that particular piece of this seems to have has a positive effect on the HBCUs in particular. Again, the slope of that line as we progress along the total enrollment of the EPP, it's positive but very small and is in no way significant. And now model 3. So there you've got, so the difference here that we're looking at, if 55 is constant here, what has gone down is domain 4, the weight on domain 4, and the weight on domain 2. And domain 3 has increased. And Andrew, I'm going to need for you to remind me what domain 3 measures.
That's the surveys.
Right, the surveys. So when you put more emphasis on those surveys, it does seem to have kind of a starting to bring those EPPs in that 0 to 50 range down. Down's not the right word. Closer to average is probably the better way to put it. With the equal weighting on 2, 3, and 4, you're seeing a much bigger spread in the ratings for schools of 0 to 50 enrollment. Again, the slope here is very small, small positive, and is not in any way significant. So our conclusion to this is that program size does not seem to be having any impact on the EPP's overall performance rating. And to answer the second question, in all models, we see HBCUs distributed pretty evenly in the performance relative to their non-HBCU peers. We're not seeing anything that suggests to us that there's disadvantage in this model for those HBCUs. But if we go back to number 2, it seems to me that this model gives us the best spread. Andrew, I need to pause here. Is this the one is this right? Is this the one that we decided gave us the best? Yeah.
55, 15,
Looks like
15, 15.
it looks like it gives us the best distribution, especially in that critical 0 to 50 range. But we're happy to take any questions you have about this.
So Tom, it's, this is Van. In your total enrollment across the bottom.
Yeah.
And you get out to, looks like, what is the last number, 450?
Yeah.
There are EPPs that enroll more than 450. So what's enrollment mean, or what's happening with that dynamic?
So this is, Andrew, is this 1-year enrollment or 3-year enrollments?
I think we did 1.
Yeah, I think this is just,
Is it enrollment or formally admitted, like ATC candidates?
It would be admitted.
Or is it,
That would bring the enrollment number down, Van, right? Like, so you'd have more students in your program than you had who were actually admitted to candidacy. That's the way I interpreted it.
but there, even under that parameter, there would be institutions in the state that have more than 450
Candidates?
of people admitted to the major or admitted to a graduate program?
They're formally admitted to candidacy.
Let me.
Because you could be in the
check
major and not
something.
be admitted to candidacy, right?
Let me check something. I'm
Correct.
trying
Well,
to.
that would mean interns. So that would mean production head. Yeah, how many are you putting out a year?
Yeah.
That's a different number. That number would make more sense, but it's a different number.
I think it's production, but let me check the data here a second.
How many do you produce on average in a 3-year span? That number would make sense on this chart.
Oh, I think I prefer cupcakes than lemon.
well, it seems to be also that since we've got employers data, they'd have to be completers
Right.
and employed as of the 18-19 school year.
Yeah. So it's just revising.
I think that's, yeah, so I need, total enrollment is a misnomer here. I need to fix that.
It is completers. Yeah. I agree with that.
Completers.
We'll fix that for you, but that's an important point. And yeah, because they've also got EVOS data and NESIS data, so it has to be completers. My guess is it's completers in 18 who then were employed in the 18-19 school year.
So Andrew, it was just 1 year data. It's not a 3-year average or anything.
I think we only did 1 year for this analysis.
Okay.
And the reason, by the way, for that is the EdCPA PPAT scores are relatively new. Like, we don't have 3 years longitudinal data on that front.
And Kim, can you back up one slide? And so the 7 green dots are intended to represent the non-predominantly white institutions.
They are those institutions that are formally classified as an HBCU. That is not their percentage of minority necessarily. Those two things are strongly correlated.
And so am I interpreting that correctly by doing this? Elizabeth City State, Fayetteville State, Central, A&T, Winston-Salem State.
Bennett.
Would you say? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about privates. I was going through the UNC list. That's it.
That's all I have to say to you, Ben.
Please. Listen. I'm coming back to you, Ann, because you owe me I've just lost a high value trade. You haven't sent me I sent you a Major League pitcher. I gotta have something back. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So you said that sheet 2, which is, what percentages were those breakdowns? You said you thought was the best.
55, 15, 15, 15.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry I got on late, but so we're considering this to call the question on which distribution?
Well, I think the questions that came up from the last meeting was, it looks like this 4-domain model is potentially working. We seem to be a little bit more comfortable with the notion of it. And then there was this question of, well, as we start to think about where we're distributing the weighting, is that unwittingly biasing in some way, large schools versus small schools, HBCs versus non-HBCs. So I think, long story short, the answer from Tom and Andy's analysis here largely is that is not the case. And so now it's back to you all to think about the weighting here, and what Tom is suggesting is, by a look at the distribution here, that the one that seems to make the most sense to him is the 55, 15, 15, 15.
I think this data will be very good to send forth to the state board as well, and in some kind of summary report that these things were checked out, but also out to all the EPPs, right? Because these are the questions that we're getting. These are the questions I'm getting. I'm sure other people are getting this. Am I being disadvantaged, for this reason, that reason, that reason? So I know we still have to answer the question of what to do with people that don't have a comparison group. But this is, this could really, while no one's going to really want an accountability model for lots of reasons, this will help calm some misconceptions.
That's a really good point, and I just want everybody to know that two things have to happen as we, essentially, as we look forward. The subcommittee has to make the decision on its work, hand it to the commission. The commission has to approve that as a recommendation to the board, and then the board has to green light it as well before it goes over to the legislature. Now, behind the scenes, I'm working on a document that looks like the document I prepared for the legislature back in February, when we did the first pass, with all the modifications that have happened from February to now. And you're right, Ann, when we think about that document, which is sort of here's what we did, here's what we came up with, and so on and so forth, we have to come up with a similar, although not exactly the same document, that goes out to the various EPPs. And I would imagine that I'll also do a webinar as well to share our findings and have a couple of you on there to share some of the thinking and to sort of answer any questions and alleviate any fears. So I think those two things are going to emerge as we head forward in the various stages.
So, Tom, back to something you said a second ago, a news headline from this data would be program size does not advantage or disadvantage performance in this model. And that if you look at if you look at the trend line, given that eight is a performance indicator. Whoever's up there slightly above 8 is doing, quote, better, according to the model, than the one down around 3.
Correct.
And the distribution, so I'm trying to look at it sideways. The programs then distribute fairly evenly across the trend line.
Yes. One thing I will point out, which may cause us some problems with the State Board of Education, is in some questions we received about our model. So the levels are not indicated here. I used the scale of the performance model, but the cuts are at 2.5, 5, 7.5. You'll notice in this model, nobody is below 2.5. Which was one of the board members raised some questions about what good is an accountability model that doesn't identify as anybody as needing an improvement. I think the pushback on that is a level 2 does indicate need for improvement. It doesn't indicate a sanction. But
Tom, I hear that. I hear what they're saying. But do they not understand, right, the whole idea about continuous improvement, right? Like, you don't need to be sanctioned to be continuously improving your program. Just having this data available helps campuses think about where they're really strong and where they need to improve. I think I'm just going to continue to push back on this idea that we have to have somebody get sanctioned when 2/3 of the teachers in our state aren't even coming from colleges and universities in the state. So I don't know where their data is that we are not performing as expected.
And I think, I appreciate that, Michael. And I think for us, one of the challenges is to have a solid rationale for why the 2.5 is the critical threshold, and then it's performance against a standard, not against each other.
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. This is not a criterion referenced. I mean, we're not saying you didn't meet that standard. We're saying you're in the bottom 25% of the way we measure this model. And so I think that's an important distinction. And, I think, I don't want this to be construed as being critical. I think what the key interest here from the board is this a rigorous model? And so they're using the fact that someone is not meeting standard as an indicator of program rigor or the rigor of the model. And I think that's what we need to try to pull back from. Let's look at the elements that are in here. So we're looking at the same elements that we hold districts to in terms of their success. That is the evaluation of teachers, the EVOS data, all those things that we use as quality indicators for the school system. We're also using those same indicators to measure the quality of the EPPs. And I think the more we can kind of go back to that point, and that makes this model inherently rigorous, because we concede that it's rigorous for schools and for our students, our K-12 students.
Yeah, and Tom, I would imagine when this goes before the commission, I could hear Patrick Miller saying, okay, given the integrity of the model, I prefer to hire teachers who were in the 6 to 8 range, but the teachers who were in the 3 to 5 range are far better as an option than people who are coming in through other routes where they have no preparation at all. And I'm not saying the ones below the line or the ones in the bottom quadrant are weak, It's that I've heard Patrick say many times, our superintendents here in New Hanover County, at the end of the day, we want EPP prepared teachers, but we don't have that option in every case. So I really applaud your work you put into this, because I think it speaks to the integrity of the model.
Let me jump in for just a second and get Kim to chime in here as well. One of the things we're trying to do is get a couple of PEPSC members together with a couple of board members together again. And Kim, I don't know where we're at in that process in terms of setting that up, but the goal here, I think, it was J.B. Buxton that brought up that concern about nobody in the sanctionable side of things. I think the purpose of that meeting with PEPSC leadership and board leadership as a preparation to moving forward is to try and address some of those questions that came up in the board to make sure that everybody's on the same page there. Kim, do you have a date on that yet, or are you still working on it?
I need confirmation from Deanna, but it right now is tentatively planned for Monday, the 13th, from 9 to 10. And I've invited Patrick Miller and Michael Mott from our side. And then it would be James Ford, Olivia Oxendine, and J.B. Buxton.
Right, so there I would envision talking to those members as we did up in the board meeting before the COVID fiasco, and basically saying, look, from the board meeting you had 4 concerns. You wanted to add diversity. You had concerns about folks not being identified as sanctionable, and I forget what the other 2 are, but here's those 4 things. We tried to address them in this the new model, walk through the model, address those questions, and answer any feedback at that point. That's the purpose of that meeting, is to try and smooth the way into the board. But I think that's a place where Dr. Marr, you'll be able to voice some of those counter reasonings to not having folks necessarily in the sanctionable side of things. And by the way, one other point there is Title II has the ability to smash EPPs as well at the federal level, and no EPPs are in jeopardy in North Carolina from Title II. So they're looking at a variety of criteria, and they're saying everybody's meeting their expectations as well.
Andrew, do we have another point might be, do we have anybody, you don't have to answer this because this is maybe confidential information, but do we have anybody that's in jeopardy of accreditation?
That is, you mean for national accreditation?
State or national, because that's another point, right? Like we have to do state or national accreditation. We have to do Title II accreditation. We have to do this accountability model that's going to be sent forth. So the data points, so if you have nobody that's in Title II trouble, and let's just say we don't have anybody that's in, sanctionable or closing down accreditation trouble at state or national level, this is all, the data is all helping each other say, we can improve, but we don't have anybody that's in, quote, big trouble.
Shut them down, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and the concurrent validity of this model with the Title II and the accreditation process, I think is a really powerful statement about why this model is working. And the other thing we need to point out for a lot of reasons, time being one of them, we did not model this on 3 years. We're just looking at a snapshot of data and how this is working. This might look very different once we add, once we go to a 3-year aggregated model. These composite measures generally are pretty stable at the EPP level, so I don't anticipate like huge swings in this, but it is possible that those 3 years are going to provide even more distribution, and you may see some people dropping down into the level 1. But I would say it would be 1 or 2. It's not like it's everybody's going to drop down in the distribution because of the size of the data we're working with here. I think it's pretty stable.
And I'll say this, thank you. I say this as well, and this is more maybe sounding more a bit of a rant, but if someone does get sanctioned and gets closed down, let's just say because of domain 4, is that really helping North Carolina? I mean, you don't have to answer that. I just have to say it. Because again, 2/3 of our teachers come from out of state. So is it we want to, yeah.
Well, and Dr. Bullock, I think your point is well heard, and I heard that directly from Representative Horn multiple times, that the purpose of this accountability is not to beat up EPPs, it's to try and drive improvement. Now, you know, it may be functioning not in the way they intended, but it certainly came. I mean, I asked him point blank because I wanted to get clarity on whether the legislature had it in their mind that institutions needed to be shut down. That's not the purpose of this exercise.
That might be another thing to remind folks on Monday. Just saying, if it comes up. Thank you.
So one other thing that needs to be addressed in this is the domain 3. So the big unknown here is that currently that domain 3 is being populated from surveys that have about a, I don't know, 20% response rate, Andrew?
No, that's low, Tom. I would say it's maybe 38 or 39 for one of them and close to 50 for the other, but it still is too low.
Yeah. So we're working on policy that would require, since you're going to be measured on this, it seems only fair that you get as much information as you can possibly get to populate that measure. You know, when response rates are that low on a survey, to me that often indicates that you're getting kind of bimodal responses there. Like, I really loved my program, so I'm going to respond to this, or I really hated my program, so I'm going to take the time to respond to this. And you're not getting that good middle to understand, you know, really what's going on overall programmatically for you. So that's going to change the nature of that variable in a way we cannot predict. That domain 3. If we're able to successfully get some kind of state board policy or even statute that requires that recent hire and recent employer survey to be completed as a condition of whatever. I don't know what the carrot or the stick there is, but that's going to have an impact on that measure that we can't anticipate. And I will further say, this, of course, domain 1 is going to be impacted by the fact that in this model in particular, which will be the last year that you'll see this is based on EVOS data that covers a wide range of your programs in an EPP. Moving forward, that data will be limited to some very specific areas of your EPPs. That is elementary and middle school math and reading. And then in secondary programs, that would be English, math, and biology.
Tom, this is Hank. I may have missed this because I missed the last meeting, but within that domain 1, did we weight those different performance indicators?
Yes, I can answer that, Dr. Weddington. So what we ended up doing, the assumption here, based on the last meeting, was that we would weight the EdPPA PPAT at 50% of the value of domain 1. Proficiency is not practicable yet, and so EVOS is at 0.25. I'm drawing a blank on the other. NESIS is at 0.25. So that's how the whole model was built, based on the emphasis of EdTPA as the point at which EPPs have the most impact.
Great, thank you. I just want.
Sure, good question.
Hey, Ann, can I ask you a question, put you on the spot a little bit?
Sure.
So, and you can ignore it, but if we go back maybe 3 months, you had articulated well concerns about how the structure of the model was coming together. Has the refinement gotten you to a different place?
So what's gotten me to a different place is the data, like this data that Tom has brought forth, right? So that's because to me, so yes, but mostly the data, yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other thoughts, questions, concerns? So given that, are we comfortable, is this subcommittee comfortable making a decision on a 4-domain model at this time? And if so, what weighting would we like to do? And then after that, I want to talk about a couple of outlier conditions. But I want to see how we're doing on the model itself.
Okay, I'll say it since I've said I'm now comfortable. I think we're probably about as good as we're going to get. And I think we should go with the recommendation with the sheet too, with the percentages.
Which one was that?
That's the 15, 15, 15, 50, 55, 15, 15, 15.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with Ann.
Kim, do we need to follow some kind of process here, just like the chair need to ask for a motion, or is that just the full?
Only with the full commission.
Okay.
Yeah, this is more the workhorse subcommittee level.
Right. This is what we'll take to the full commission.
Okay. Is anybody?
Andrew, Lucas, can we hear from you?
I'm sorry, I talked over you. Who was that, Tom?
Andrew.
I was just seeing if we had any input from Andrew Lakis.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think that model makes the most sense, particularly because it shows less or maybe no bias against HBCUs, and it just feels, I'm kind of with Van. I think we've taken this as far as we can take it, and I think it's a pretty good model.
Okay.
And
All right,
who is WST?
I don't know who that is.
Okay.
I think
we need-
that's your man at the department who runs the backside of the technology.
Lawrence? Might be.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure everybody was.
It's just somebody who's getting an advanced scoop, Tom. So this will show up in the newspapers tomorrow.
All right, I see it in WRAL. It's coming up right now.
It's the Winston-Salem Times, and they have an exclusive.
So Andrew and Tom, back to your strategy points earlier, the two people from PEPSC that are gonna cross over with the two people from the board, who were they again?
Kim, can you chime in there? I don't know if she's there. Let me take a swing at it.
It's me and Patrick.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Okay.
And the
Mike,
reason,
okay.
just to a point of clarity here, you can't have too many of you guys and you can't have too many of board guys all together because it's a violation of how the work happens. And so what we said was, let's bring leadership of PEPSC together with the folks that voiced some questions at the board meeting, of which there were 3. So that's how that decision was made. It wasn't for any other reason than to play by the rules that are in place.
Yeah, and Michael's been fully immersed in this, and he carries that with him along with the proposal.
Yep. Makes sense to me.
I'm sorry, guys. I lost connection. I'm not sure what has happened in the past couple minutes.
We solved all the problems of education.
We're going to rerun the models with a different set of variables, and
Well, I know Tom and Andrew are happy.
and what protested loudly that we need another 400 data.
She was waiting for me to leave. See that?
I was hoping you were hearing my rant, but you didn't, so sorry.
I got that we said yes to the 55, 15, 15, 15 model.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, we were just talking about who is representing PEPSC of the subcommittee. The little mini meeting between PEPSC folks and board folks, and the answer was the leadership from PEPSC. So the
Right.
Chairman Miller and Dr. Moore.
Yeah.
Also, Tomerlin wanted to know who WST was, so if you know who that is, then please let him know.
Yeah, so Andy Baxter chimed in that WST is the guy at DPI. So.
Yeah, that's Lawrence.
Okay, good.
Okay. All right. So,
Who also writes for the Winston-Salem Times.
that's right. That's right. All right. So we don't have a lot of time left, but we do have a lot of work to do in terms of decision making around how to support this model for EPPs that do not have institutions. So I would like to get thoughts on that. So in essence, if you think back on domain 4, we looked at 3 different ways of looking at data associated with percent non-white, and that was growth over time, the EPP compared to the parent institution, and the EPP compared to the state. Since the EPPs that do not have an institution are present now, there's about 5 or 6 of them, how would you like us to proceed to accommodate an institution-like variable for them? Would you like to, the thing that comes to mind for me is to sum all the EPPs that do not have institutions together, that the institution. And I don't know if Tom has some ideas to weigh in on as well.
So I have a couple of questions for you, Andrew, on that. Refresh my memory on the domain 4. Did we take a 3-pronged approach to that? In other words,
yes, we
you
did.
get points for growth, you get points for comparison to institution, you get points for, what was the third one?
State.
To the state.
And so each of those is weighted at even value, a third, a third, a third. And then that's aggregated up and will be weighted at 15% of the overall.
I think the only, in my mind, and I want Andy's opinion on this, the only really fair way to do that is to redistribute the points for a non-IHE EPP to the growth against the prior year and against, and relative to the state.
So
I don't think
it's at 0.5 each then?
Yeah, that's the way I would propose to do it, because I don't think it makes a lot of sense to aggregate non-EPP IHEs together and say that that is some way meaningful. Andy, do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree. I think it's just a little bit contorted to try to come out of something, coming up with something like that.
Okay. Right. Yeah, so I think we can adjust that, and we can add those to the model here pretty quickly. there's anything else for the good of the cause. Yeah, the only other thing that I have on my notes here is that the four institutions, I shouldn't say institutions, the four EPPs that showed up as a level 1 sanction, those were institutions that were missing sufficient amounts, not sufficient, they were missing a lot of data in the model. So I wonder if another rule should be, and I'm just thinking out loud here, do we need to have something in place that that EPPs that essentially don't go into this model until they have 2 years worth of data? Because in the case of the four that are at level 1, they're just missing tons of data, and then the few places of data that they have, it's obviously not a full holistic perspective of what's going on yet. So, any thoughts about that?
I thought the goal here was that the accountability model was based on 3-year rolling average of the data.
I believe that so in the case of an institution that would only have 1 year worth of data, they would still play ball?
No, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought our original thinking on this was we're going to give you, that is the EPP data on year 1 and year 2 for program improvement. But you won't show up in the accountability model until you have 3 years of data, and then you will roll along as normal. But maybe I'm remembering that incorrectly. I want to make sure this group is in agreement that that's how we would conduct the accountability model.
I think the only challenge to that, Tom, is if we bring on an EPP like a Teachers of Tomorrow or like an RTI, one of these that come in and they get started, you're effectively saying they could be a train wreck for 3 years before we issue sanctions. That gives me pause.
Well, yeah, that's a good, I am sensitive to that. I wonder if there's a way, I go back to those rules around the accountability model, like if you're not meeting expectation in 2 domains for 1 year, that's sanctionable. You remember what I'm talking about there?
Yeah. And it's also the purview of the board can issue a sanction at its own discretion anywhere along the way.
Yeah, and Andrew, to continue your thought, they have to have 3 years before they get to adequate data, and then they go into the model, and there could be subsequent years in the process. So it could be 5 or 6 years. And
Yeah.
They may shut down and head back out.
I think it's problematic to not have some accountability for an institution out of the gate. Now, Tom, to your point, maybe we want to look at the sanction side of things, try and make some accommodations for for new entities coming in or entities that don't have a full boat of data. But I do think it concerns me not to be able to have a trigger to give not dysfunctional new folks sanctions.
I agree. I think the challenge for us is defining clearly in policy what that looks like for an EPP who has not yet met the 3-year average, and being very, very clear about under what circumstances the board would issue a sanction outside of the normal accountability model. We can't have that be arbitrary or capricious. We can't just get the data and look at it and say, oh, well, this doesn't look good to me, let's sanction them. we'd have to have very clear rules around that. So that's why I'm going back to what was in that statute. If we could kind of model that our pre-accountability model sanction guidelines. So, if in year one, you're a level one on two domains, that's going to put you in sanction. And then we'll look at your next year's data and, that kind of thing, so that we can be very clear with folks about how this would roll.
Let me just say it back to you, Tom. So if Andrew University shows up and only has 4 of the 8 measures, and we say that if you're at the domain or at the subdomain level, you're at a level 1 on any of those 2, you would potentially have a sanction earlier than the full weighted model. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I don't know that I was going down into the subdomain.
You were at the domain level.
Yeah, at the domain level, I would say, if you're a train wreck on 2 of our domains, and at the end of year 1, we're going to have to put some kind of label on you and monitor you. I don't know. I don't know if this is exact. I don't know if we're going to solve that nut in the next 1 minute that we have on the line, but I think it's definitely something we need to pay attention to. I think for our EPPs that have 3 years of rolling data, it's very clear to me that a level 1, that our accountability process is going to be based on a 3-year rolling average of data. It's these folks that are coming into the model new that we have to figure out what is our oversight until such time as they are fully invested in the accountability model.
Okay. Do you think that we can proceed with the timeline here and tee up these outliers for a later discussion, or do you think we need to have all this worked out beforehand to move it back to the board?
So I think this is a really important first start, is to nail down the accountability model writ large, and then I think we could go to the full PEPSC. I don't think we need this subcommittee to make those determinations about folks who are new EPPs coming into the model. I think once we've nailed down how we're going to measure people, that gives us really good path for, okay, here's how you're going to deal with people who are coming in, newly approved EPPs, and the entire commission, I think, can then make that recommendation. I don't think that's specific.
Tom, when those alternative EPPs were authorized, in their plans, did they have to submit some kind of benchmarking or something to get approval? They had to say, here's going to be our outcomes that are successful.
Right. So they I can send you the application so you can see what questions are asked. But each of those has to understand that they are responsible for the collection of all the data points that regular already authorized EPPs have to play ball in. And in some cases, like an RTI, obviously they've got big brains over there, but they don't necessarily have historical data for us to look at. Other institutions or other EPPs like Teachers of Tomorrow, who have been doing it in other states, do have data. So that's sort of some have it and some don't in terms of historical data. There are also EPPs that are LEAs. So like Charlotte Met is an LEA that has its own little factory for creating teachers. And so they don't have any historical precedent either. So some of that is relatively new.
So, but to your point, Van, or Dr. Dempsey, even if they put in their application, here's here are the outcomes we're going to be paying attention to, or to ensure that we're producing a quality candidate. That does not in any way absolve them from the state's accountability model in terms of the EPP. They can write whatever outcome measures they're going to hold themselves to, and as assurances to the board that they're going to produce quality candidates. But in the end, they're subject to the same accountability standards for EPPs as anybody else.
I mean, and Van is fine, by the way. Tom, this may come off as cynical. I probably even mean it to be cynical. With some of these alternative EPPs, I mean, I've looked at them as a dean of a college of education and said, damn, I wish we could do it that way. I mean, we could do it that way. It would, you know, how much easier it would be to produce teachers. We could double our enrollment. I mean, you know, all kinds of things might happen. And so I feel like they're already sort of off the hook, and now we're going to give them, you know, I'm not saying we are, but there's the potential we'll give them a pass on a few more things, including accountability. So I agree, there's got to be something, even if it's the first year of operation, that says you are meeting something. Or the alternative is a public statement that we do not have sufficient data to assess the quality of, I mean, something. Even that is its own, you know, sort of watch out kind of statement. I just think, I agree, Tom, and Andrew, there's got to be something at the state board level that is, you just don't get a free for all for 3 years.
I agree.
They've gotten enough. They've gotten enough to be able to exist.
Here, here.
And that goes back.
Existence is enough.
Well, right, and that goes back to my earlier point about a third of our teachers are coming through these pathways, and so, you know, if there's this perception that people aren't doing their job, to not let a third of the providers be part of the model, a huge problem. So I totally agree.
Yeah, the only thing I'd chime in with there is that I do think that accountability falls back on the state board. I mean, that's our model, is to determine if a program is effective. It's not to determine if we think it will be effective. The state board does that. And DPI, you know, through DPI's process, y'all run that. Our model should be able to show within those 3 years, is it working or not? And if they approve a bunch of programs that don't work, that's a separate conversation, in my opinion.
So Andrew, I think you're really raising an important point there, that distinction between it's not PEPSC's job to determine if we think this program will be successful. I would question whether it is. Does approval of EPPs, is that a function of PEPSC under the law?
Well, and just to be clear, I just mean the building of the accountability framework. It doesn't fit within there. It may very well need to fit within PEPSC. I just think those are two different functions.
I agree, but that could go a long way in establishing those expectations.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly says it's the board's responsibility in 599.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is, does a recommendation for an EPP need to go through PEPSC before it goes to the board?
No,
It does not.
no.
By policy.
It's not policy. Okay.
Oh, no, according to current procedures, it does not go before PEPSC.
The requirements, the requirements in law is that an entity that wants to be an initially authorized EPP has to do three things. One, it has to abide by whatever application procedure that gets put together. Two, it has to get support by the Ed Prep department. And then three, it has to, what is three? Can't remember what three is. It has to be peer reviewed. So those are the three things that are in law for an entity trying to become initially authorized. Once those three things are met, then it goes to the board for approval consideration.
So could entities like the ones we're talking about, who may have insufficient time to meet the true structure we're proposing, have some kind of provisional rating that has that footnote? They're here in the accountability model, but it is a provisional statement given they only have, I mean, something like that. I mean, they're in the model, but we acknowledge, you know, their boat is not at full speed yet, but based on what they have, this is where they are.
Yeah, and I think that's the tension we need to balance, Van, is, you know, sufficient time to get your feet under you and succeed, and making sure that you just aren't a complete disaster from the get-go and we let you hang around for 3 or 4 years before we can determine that. I think that's something Andrew and I are going to have to get our heads together on and get back to you. But again, I think that's the full commission. I think what I was pondering was what Andrew was saying is since the approval of an EPP, I don't want to spend any more time on this. I'll talk to Andrew about this, but Andrew's comment just triggered something in my head that I think I need to investigate. But I think we're all on the same page here, is that we need a process to review data of EPPs, newly approved EPPs, for the first 2 years until they become formally vested in the accountability model.
Yep.
Yeah, and just one more thing to add to that, Tom. If UNC that because when we initiated our clinical residency component, that performance and that data is as if it had never existed before, because we had never done it before. And so we would assume that UNCW would have the same flexibility in the startup of that component of our EPP that Charlotte Meck or RTI is going to get, but that's not how it works. It's all pulled into our aggregate performance.
So your argument is we're applying a new accountability model to historic data that under which you did not have those expectations when it was collected.
Nor did we have the structure, nor have we ever committed the resources to that structure. I'm not protesting that. I'm just saying I actually believe I think we can, and I appreciate we need to move on, but we can get to a way to hold those EPPs accountable in the first 12 months.
I agree with that, by the way. I think with the model we built, we need to find a way to progress monitor or track, even if the full data wouldn't be available for a few years. I don't think we're like, hey, you get 3 years to figure it out and then we'll see how you're doing. I mean, I do have to run though. See that we're over and I've got another meeting to get to. Maybe I propose we come back to this, but it seems like we're able to move forward with the model on Monday with the state board members. Is that right?
I think that sounds right.
Okay.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, everybody.
Any other thoughts for the good of the cause before we let y'all go? And I appreciate all the input today. This is come a long way here.
It's great work. This is just
Yes. It's about a year.
Thank you. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the governor's announcement next week. He's going to come and say PEPSC has. Maybe that's what's coming.
I think that's happening. I'm just going to go out on a limb there.
That would be simpler than what he has to actually talk about.
Yeah, crazier things are happening. So,
all right. Well, listen, for the remainder of you here, we will send out. Kim and I will send out an email to these two subcommittees after the little micro meeting between PEPSC leadership and a couple board members. If you have an update as to what happened there, it'll be what it is, and then we'll see you all. Is it next Thursday, Kim?
Yes, at 9 a.m.
Next Thursday at 9 a.m. And if anybody has any questions between now and then, obviously just email us and we'll help out wherever we can.
Thanks. Kim, I'll see you at 1 o'clock.
Yes, I'll see you then, man. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you, Ann.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
All right, thanks.